Antes de começar o vídeo, eu queria pedir para você acessar o primeiro link aqui na descrição e conferir o nosso novo projeto savedrop ofertas, um site só de ofertas gamers para jogadores aí de console, de PlayStation, de Xbox, de jogos, de tudo. Você já está vendo aqui na tela inicial que a gente tem aqui, ó, oferta de console Xbox Series S, os jogos aqui, também os próximos lançamentos. Temos jogos aqui mais em conta, mais baratos, e a gente não vende jogos, e sim mostra ofertas de outras lojas como Amazon, Americana, só loja grande. A gente também tem o grupo de ofertas, que o link também está na descrição, no WhatsApp e no Telegram. E além dos jogos aí de PS4 e PlayStation 5 e Xbox, também mostramos aqui os destaques da Steam e também da Epic Games aí para quem joga no PC. Então acesse aí o link na descrição, savedrop.com.br, e apoie aí o nosso projeto e economize aí também nos seus jogos. Estamos aqui em mais um dia com mais uma notícia de Spider-Man Miles Morales, que é o jogo aí que eu acho que mais tem atualização aí. Todo dia sai uma notícia do Spider-Man Miles Morales, e hoje, dia 23 aí de outubro, não foi diferente. Temos aí agora um gameplay de Spider-Man Miles Morales de 24, quase 25 minutos da Eurogamer, e a gente vai dar uma olhada aqui nisso. Mas antes de tudo, sejam bem-vindos aí a mais um vídeo aqui na savedrop. Eu sou o Matt. Vamos dar o play aqui, ó, eurogamer.net. Tá aí nevando em Nova York. Esse gameplay provavelmente tá rodando aí, tá em HD, tá? Não tem 4K, mas também eu não faço aí, não renderizo o vídeo em 4K, então vai ficar em Full HD aí, 60 FPS. Lembrando que deve estar rodando no PlayStation 5, aqui tá no título, PlayStation 5 Gameplay. Eles vão mostrar aí 14 novos detalhes, não 14 detalhes, mas 14 novos detalhes aí sobre o Spider-Man Miles Morales. Ó, R2 do swing, R2 para pular, é para soltar aí a teia, né? Eu acho que não tem legenda, deixa eu até dar uma olhada. Ó, coloquei legenda, vou colocar uma legenda aqui traduzida automaticamente para a gente ter uma ideia do que está acontecendo.
Minutes or so of Spider-Man Miles Morales, the follow-up to 2018's Marvel's Spider-Man, coming to PS4 and PS5.
Vai chegar para PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5. No primeiro dia já do PlayStation 5 já tá lançado, tá? Já vai estar disponível. E antes aí já vai estar no PlayStation 4, acho que dia 12.
Take on the Spider-Man universe in the original game, we are super excited to see how the studio handles this next adventure starring Miles Morales, the kid arachnid who brings new powers, new perspectives, and new conflicts to the role of your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Miles is now 1 year into the job as Peter's partner in crime fighting, and he's very much still learning the ropes. But
o Miles já tá há um ano aí já no trabalho de Homem-Aranha.
Has come for him to briefly step into the spandex shoes of New York's only Spider-Man when Pete gets called overseas with MJ. After checking out the demo, I chatted with Brian Horton, creative director of the game, and Cameron Christian, game director, to talk about what I'd seen. Here are some of the details you might want to know about. Potential spoiler warning if you plan on going into Spider-Man Miles Morales totally fresh, and an additional spoiler warning for some of the events of the original game.
Ela falou que vai ter alguns spoilers do jogo anterior e também alguns spoilers não tão grandes do Miles Morales, então se você não quer spoiler, é melhor você nem ver isso daqui. Não quer nenhum tipo de spoiler, né? Nem o mínimo. Ela vai falar também com os desenvolvedores, parece, do jogo.
Jefferson Davis in the previous game, Miles and his mother Rio have moved from Brooklyn to East Harlem for a fresh start. According to the development team, Miles getting to know his new neighborhood and home is going to be a major theme of the game.
And after the events of the first game, when his father dies, his mother decides to move them to East Harlem, her childhood home, and he gets to experience a whole new part of the city that he may have visited because it's his abuela's old apartment, but now he's living there and he's getting to learn what Harlem's all about. Is his new home. And so I would say that a big part of this game is Miles getting to learn and love the people of Harlem as his own. And that's sort of one of the themes of our game is, fighting for the people you love.
Falando, né, sobre a história do jogo, o prólogo aí do jogo.
So, in the original game, Miles's dad, Jefferson Davis, was killed in action, sacrificing himself to save the lives of others. This is probably the biggest change between Insomniac's incarnation of Miles Morales and his comic book counterpart, where Jefferson doesn't die. Rio does, but she's later brought back to life because, well, comic books. But anyway, Rio in Spider-Man Miles Morales is running for city council and directly opposing the definitely not shady Roxxon Corporation's testing site in her childhood home of East Harlem, which will undoubtedly put her in the category of people Miles must fight to protect. But it also sounds like Rio should not be underestimated.
I'd say that is one of the big defining differences between comics lore and the game universe is the death of Jefferson Davis. Obviously, we love that character. He played a huge role in Marvel Spider-Man, and he's got a huge impact on Miles Morales. I mean, Miles looked up to his father as a hero, right? And that's his example of a hero. Now we continue that hero through his parents with Rio Morales. She's an everyday hero. She's running for city council, and by them going from Brooklyn to Manhattan or to Harlem as a way to sort of add another level of
São 24 minutos de gameplay, mas a maioria aqui do tempo eles estão falando da história. Eu quero ver o gameplay aí, né, que eles estão falando. Mas, por enquanto, só os caras falando mesmo.
And I think it makes it, it sort of puts our Insomniac twist on the classic canon. But we're really excited about how much Rio's example inspires Miles. It's a big part of his journey of looking at what does it mean to be a hero. We can look at his mom, and his mom is fighting for the people she loves. She's fighting for her home of East Harlem. So that was a big unique thing that our writing team was passionate about.
Pelo que eu entendi é que o pai dele morreu, né? E a mãe dele parece que tá concorrendo a algum cargo eleitoral aí na Câmara do Nova York, né?
Was a wonderful example for Miles to look at as another kind of hero.
Of course, Miles has a superpowered hero to look up to as well. The game begins with Miles and Peter working together.
Ó, já vai começar com o Miles e o Peter, que é o Homem-Aranha original, né? Trabalhando aí juntos, transportando criminosos fugitivos aí num drone aqui enorme, passando pelo meio dos prédios ali. Rinoceronte.
By our web-slinging duo. Having two Spideys on screen at the same time allows for a lot of spectacle. As Rhino rampages through a shopping mall at Christmas, it's up to Miles to slow him as Peter grabs citizens out of harm's way. And comedy, as the pair pay a flyby visit to their biggest fan, J. Jonah Jameson. The direct interaction between Miles and Peter is
o Miles aí controlando esse rinoceronte aí que eles estão chamando no meio do shopping. Salvou o bebê aí.
Peter does take the time to set up a series of challenges for Miles and leave gifts for him before he jets off, but from that point onwards, Miles is on his own.
Dang, I'm late for Mom's rally.
Acabou a missão, agora ele tem que viver aí a vida pessoal dele. E o Homem-Aranha sempre tem, né, essa relação entre a vida profissional aí, como Spider-Man, e o personagem pessoal, né, a vida pessoal do personagem, já que o Homem-Aranha esconde ali, né, sempre escondeu que é o Homem-Aranha da família.
Not only has Genki lived in Harlem his entire life, he's clued into Miles' new identity. And he can put his technical know-how to good use by designing suits, like the tracksuit, and even an app to help Miles respond to calls for help from the public.
Come on, we're gonna be late! Hey! Dude, I am so filling your suit with snow.
We always wanted to make sure that recognize the mentorship component of Miles and Peter, but we also wanted to let Miles have his own space and figure out who he was on his own. So it actually was super important for us that Miles had to figure things out without his mentor. But that's where I think Genki Lee plays a huge role in our story, because the rapport that they have as friends, more on a peer level, like they're at the same age bracket, and they've sort of
Tem esse Genki aí que parece que é o amigo dele, né?
have similar interests. It allowed us to continue that rapport that we started with Miles and Peter. So I'm really excited for people to get to know Genki. He's a super compelling character, and mechanically he's bringing something unique to the game, because he invents this friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app, which allows the people of New York City to interface.
Esse Genki aí é aquele... Sempre tem, né? O Homem-Aranha sempre tem um amigo ali que é algum mestre, algum nerd, né, de TI. E agora esse daqui ele vai fazer... Fez, né, um aplicativo para o povo, a população de Nova York interagir aí com o Homem-Aranha através do aplicativo.
With Spider-Man directly, and I think that's a really great way for you, the player, and for Miles to get to learn Harlem.
Are you still wearing your suit?
Yeah, you know, just in case.
It's possible that Genki's app also plays another role in not having Spider-Man working directly with the NYPD as he did in 2018, a mechanic and plot point that some players criticized in the original game, and one that would feel even more out of place now in 2020. Plus, neither Spidey has someone on the inside of the police force to help them out anymore, since Yuri Watanabe went rogue, or Wraith, if you will. Anyway, Genki has essentially created an app that lets any New York...
Essa parte que tá passando parece que é a parte do trailer, né, do último trailer que teve, eu não sei se foi o primeiro, mas teve um trailer que mostra aí o Miles caminhando aqui por essa parte, é uma parte bem bonita no trailer, e aqui já não tá tão bonita assim, já tá com uma resolução menor, né, mais cinemática. Na verdade nem era cinemática lá, mas eu acho, pelo menos vendo aqui, que tá com uma menor qualidade, mas lá também na apresentação da PlayStation talvez tivesse aí um vídeo melhor renderizado e produzido do que aqui da Eurogamer, mas quando lançar vai ter gameplay aqui no canal e eu vou conferir aí como vai estar o gráfico aí do Spider-Man Miles Morales. E para vocês deve estar pior ainda. Eu tô gravando a tela aqui pelo OBS, então talvez a qualidade para vocês ainda fique menor do que eu tô vendo aqui, que já é menor também do que o original.
Some of those requests, according to Brian Horton, will open up into fully fledged side quests.
The way the app works is he's created a platform for anyone to be able to report. You know, it's citizen reporting, right? So you just, you know, citizens say, hey, I've got this problem, I have this request, here's a crime.
O aplicativo, como a gente imagina, é para denúncia, né? Denúncia é um crime ou uma pessoa aí por Homem-Aranha, por Miles.
All Genki's code does for Miles is order it in such a way that the player can understand it. So the thing that's really kind of cool about that is you can see sort of distance, how far away it is in the city, and you can get an idea of like, well, this is a quest, or this is an activity, or this is a crime. So we started to try to categorize it in ways that the players can understand it, and each of these things are unique. But one thing that was really kind of cool is we invested in our quests to make sure that quests themselves actually have a continuing storyline. So as you start to dig into these quests across the game, new ones open up, and then they tell sort of a side story that goes along with the main story.
Falou também, né, das missões paralelas, as quests, aí side quests, né, que são missões secundárias aí do jogo. Ele tá falando que conforme você vai fazendo aí, por exemplo, você pega uma missão secundária, você faz ela e desbloqueia outra relacionada a essa missão secundária, então vai ter umas historinhas secundárias ali conforme você vai se aprofundando nessas missões, nessas side quests aí.
It's really exciting that we get to experience the vibrancy of New York and Harlem through not only the perspective of Miles Morales' Spider-Man, because FYI, the entire map of the original Spider-Man PS4 game returns in Miles Morales, but there has been extra updated detail added to Harlem and East Harlem in particular, but through the eyes of Miles Morales, the teenager. Evan Narcisse, one of the narrative designers on the game, provided a brilliant insight into how Miles' experiences as a teenager are different from Peter Parker's. The teenage experience is totally different in 2020, and that is reflected in how Miles interacts with the world. Social media is, of course, a huge part.
Tá falando de uma integração aí que a gente não vê no Homem-Aranha, né, que quando o Homem-Aranha era jovem, o Homem-Aranha original era diferente do mundo de hoje. Então, o Miles Morales, o jogo se passa em 2020, pelo visto. Então, vai ter essa coisa aí de mídia social, de internet. Então, vai estar presente aí no jogo, mídias sociais, internet, essas coisas.
Of how he operates. It plays a role in the gameplay with Genki's app, and it also plays a role in the story with new character Danica.
E o aplicativo do Genki é uma das coisas, né? E também vai ter uma YouTuber no jogo. Beleza.
Part. In the comics, she's a YouTuber who ends up dating Genki. But in the game, she's been reimagined as a popular podcaster who's coming out swinging.
Tá, parece que ela é YouTuber nas histórias em quadrinho, mas no jogo vai ser uma podcaster popular que está lançando Em Busca do Homem-Aranha, pela tradução que eu acho que é isso.
So she's a podcaster. She's going to comment on the things that she cares about, and she's an activist. She believes in ensuring that the people of the neighborhood that she lives in and the city she lives in have a voice, and she has a conversation with them. And she's a fan of.
Ela é fã do Homem-Aranha, detalhe aí.
And I think that's in contrast to the other popular podcaster in Manhattan, which is J. Jonah Jameson.
E parece que é baseado, ou pelo menos relacionado a uma podcaster aí de Nova York, que é famosa, né? Que eu não conheço, porque eu não acompanho, né? Mas lá de Nova York parece que essa é a Jonah Jameson.
Just the facts.
So we have Just the Facts and we have Danicast, right? And they really provide two different perspectives on the same situations. And I think, and that's something else that's really exciting, is we're able to take Danica from the comics lore and just like JJJ is different from comics as a podcaster, by putting them as sort of dueling podcasters, it made for an interesting dynamic.
Whoa! Let's not shoot each other, all right?
But on the subject of new characters,
Acho que vai ter alguma coisa no celular aí do Miles, né? Vamos poder usar o celularzinho, usar o aplicativo, e eu acho que vai dar pra gente ouvir podcast também. Eu com certeza vou ouvir aí, porque eu já ouço na vida real, porque não ouvir aí no Spider-Man Miles Morales.
let's talk villains. First of all, there's the Tinkerer, a
Ó,
classic
vilões,
comic
não sei se
character.
essa...
Let's talk villains.
Ó, aqui tá falando que esse vilão é o Consertador, com certeza na tradução original, na tradução localização brasileira deve ter outro nome, mas o tradutor aqui é automático, tá falando que é Consertador.
Villains. First of all, there's the Tinkerer, a classic comic character who's been given a new twist. As a comic fan, it was really exciting to see Insomniac be given the freedom to put their own unique spin on Spider-Man characters and stories in the original game.
Veio dos quadrinhos, teve uma adaptação aí da Insomniac, né? Que é a desenvolvedora. Falando aí da parceria, né? Insomniac e Marvel, que é a desenvolvedora e a dona da imagem do Homem-Aranha, junto com a Sony.
Twist it, bend it, stretch it, like take chances. So they've been like Tinker is a great example.
Right.
Tinker is one of he's one of the oldest villains within the Spider-Man canon.
Esse é esse tal aí do Consertador nos quadrinhos, e aquele lá é o da versão do jogo que foi adaptado, né?
Not just in age, but just it was in the third, very early comics. So we wanted to take a new twist on the Tinkerer, and they were extremely open to the ideas we had to make a younger, more futuristic.
Então deixaram ele mais jovem e mais futurista.
On the front lines versus just behind the scenes making weapons. So that's what I would say is it's a tremendous amount of fun to dive into that very deep roster and bench of Marvel characters, but find the ones that really serve our story and serve Miles' journey. And that's really what it comes down to, is like, who are the best characters that can provide that pressure, that push and pull to make our story resonate.
Would you say she kind of has more in common with the Elijah Stern version of the character? Because, I mean, he was fired from Roxxon, but he also had interaction with...
Mas vamos falar uma coisa aqui. A Insomniac, do tamanho que é, vendeu aí Spider-Man a rodo no PlayStation 4, foi um dos jogos mais vendidos, e tá ruim de imagem, hein? A webcam desses caras aqui não tá escrito como tá ruim. Olha, a menina aqui tá quase pixelada. Eu não sei se essa menina aqui é da Insomniac ou é da Eurogamer, mas tá ruim, hein? Os dois tá ruim, na verdade, mas tá bom. Tá ruim, mas tá bom. Tanto faz, né? Pelo menos o áudio tá bom, isso é importante.
Let me just compliment.
É, aquela menina, pelo visto, é da Eurogamer, que também é uma grande imprensa, uma grande empresa de videogames, né? Uma das maiores, mas a do cara que também da Insônia, que tá ruim pra caralho.
Your knowledge. I mean, we did a lot of research
Mas
on
o áudio tá ok, então...
what the character would be. And without getting too spoilery, I would just say every single decision we made on this
Talvez
character.
nem estivesse tão ruim, mas eles só cortaram aqui, ó. Dá pra ver aqui embaixo que tá Brian Horton, que é o nome do cara. Mas eles só cortaram ali a imagem do Discord. Então ficou pior ainda.
Was to ensure that it had some of the ingredients that we loved from the first Spider-Man game, which was villains that were complex and nuanced and had motivations and heroes of their own story. So that was a big motivator, is making sure our villains felt rich and had a full arc themselves. So that's where I'll leave it there.
I knew I wasn't going to get an answer on that, but I had to dig anyway. If you don't know who Aaron Davis is, do not worry, we'll get to him in a second. So, this incarnation of the Tinkerer is the leader of a new, high-tech criminal army called the Underground, who oppose the Roxxon Corporation, but whose ideologies beyond that remain a mystery for now. On the Roxxon side of things, their public-facing arm is being headed up by a man named Simon Krieger, voiced by the one and only Troy Baker.
Mostrando aí mais vilões.
Talk a bit about Simon Krieger, because he's a character in the comics, but he's not a hugely recognizable one, and he's more closely tied with Iron Man. Would it be safe to say you guys are putting your own spin on him? Why did you choose him specifically?
Well, we did a lot of research on Roxxon, and we were looking for a character that...
Pra quem tá curioso aí sobre as histórias aí dos personagens, esse é um bom vídeo, mas pra quem quer ver gameplay nem tanto, tá mais ou menos aí. Tá bom, mas não tá... Tá mais falando que mostrando a gameplay, né?
I guess the driver of the plot, right? And so new form was one of these
Tá dando som.
research on. And we twisted what new form was. New form in our game is this clean, renewable energy, very powerful energy source. And we were looking for characters in the Roxxon family for that. And Simon Krieger has a connection to new form. So we just did a little bit of change and twist and put our Insomniac flavor on it. And we thought that was, let's create this aspirational kind of, character that is trying to profess this is the future of energy. And here I am out there, and I'm gonna transform energy for the world. So that's the pitch, right? And
Yeah.
But what we can see very clearly, anyone can sort of peek through that veneer, and you see that there's something not quite right going on. So Simon Krieger, we wanted to bring a certain level of charisma, but also something underneath all of that.
Falando aí sobre esse Simon Krieger, não sei quem é.
To be able to bring Troy Baker in to interpret that character, and I think he brought with all of his talents, was able to bring a very complex and nuanced character, but also someone that has a tremendous amount of charm and smarm at the same time. It's like it's a little bit of both. To bring what we think is a like you're saying, not a well-known character, but someone who is part of the Marvel lore.
Roxxon is going to be a big adversary for Miles by the looks of things, and the company is smart enough and rich enough to develop ways of combating his unique set of powers, according to game director Cameron Christian.
Falando dessa tal de Roxane, esses zumbis, não, nossa, fui longe agora. Esses vilões aí, eles têm umas armas, um corpo ali tecnológico, né, como você pode ver, e tem uns LEDs também. Olha, ele até fala aqui, ó, ataques bioelétricos por tecnologia, né? Parecendo até uns personagens aí do Cyberpunk.
More on Miles' abilities in a bit. First, let's go back to Aaron Davis quickly. Also known as Prowler, Aaron is Miles' uncle, a career criminal who is a source of a lot of conflict.
Tio do Miles.
Pretty much every incarnation of Miles' Spider-Man.
Esse não é aquele cara do filme. Eu vi o filme do Miles Morales, é muito bom. Se você não viu, é um filme em animação que é um dos melhores filmes aí. É que eu vou dar spoiler aqui se falar, mas tem o tio dele lá que tem algumas coisas aí, então nem vou falar. Mas é um filme muito bom. Um dos melhores filmes aí
Anyway, he's meant to be
de super-herói.
introduced in this universe outside of a very brief mention during a cutscene. And although Brian and Cameron didn't really want to talk too much about him during our chat, it seems like his existence in this game has been leaked by none other than Miles himself. In an Instagram story posted in late June that was very quickly removed, face model and voice actor for Miles, Naji Jeter, shared some very energetic takes from.
Então, pelo que eu entendi, o Miles, o ator, eu acho, do Miles, sei lá quem. Na verdade, nem sei se tem ator, algum dublador aí, sei lá o que, postou nos stories do Instagram algo que vazou em um personagem que não sei se é o tio dele, não tô entendendo muito bem. Eu acho que é o tio dele mesmo. O tio Aaron Ring. Aí, ó. É bom que eles mostram tudo aqui. Eles são jornalistas, então eles já mostram tudo aqui. E a gente já fica por dentro. O Mr. Davis é o tio dele. E esse cara provavelmente é o dublador aí do Miles no jogo. Tá com uma camiseta do Nirvana aí. Ele fala Mr. Davis, porém a Insônia que não falou nada ainda sobre o tio. Inclusive ela perguntou aqui pro desenvolvedor aí, ou pro diretor, sei lá, perguntou se tinha aí o tio do Miles no jogo. Ele não falou nada, mas parece que tem, né?
Hey, Mr. Davis, how are things looking now?
Por que ele fica com a mão assim?
And let me get the non-exerted one because I don't think the next one is for a while.
Ele tá fazendo de casa isso? Acho que ele tá na casa dele.
Mr. Davis, how are things looking now?
Da hora ver, né, o desenvolvimento, a dublagem. E também parece que tá fazendo a captura de movimento também, né, ali.
Someone else in the room also mentions him checking in with an Uncle Aaron. So that's pretty cut and dry confirmation if you ask us. But what we don't know yet is how Aaron will appear in Miles's life and how that will fit into the wider story with the underground and Roxxon. Watch this space, I guess.
I'm kind of lucky.
Muito boa essa reportagem. Muito bem feito.
That have been released of Spider-Man Miles Morales so far, some fans have noticed that his swinging style differs from Peter's. It's actually a lot like
isso eu vi. Como o Miles está começando aí na vida de Homem-Aranha, ele não é muito experiente, então diferente do jogo original, que o Peter, né, ele é mais ágil e tal. Eu não joguei o Spider-Man, o original, mas ele é mais experiente e aqui o Miles é mais novato, então pode ser que ele erre aí, e é diferente também os saltos aí dele. Menos coordenado, ela falou. Então é um novo Homem-Aranha. E agora o desenvolvedor tá falando que vai ser diferente, que ele é menos coordenado, mas que não vai afetar no gameplay.
The whole story and even gameplay is about his growth and learning to be a Spider-Man.
Ele tá aprendendo, né, a ser um Homem-Aranha.
And so, you know, James Hamm, who is a senior animator, is a big proponent of getting not only the traversal animals to feel like he's not quite sure, he's a little, you know, gangly and trying to figure out how to do this.
Legal.
Traversal and combat moves really sold his like, hey, I'm just trying to figure this out and I'm learning it. I don't have any experience, while still keeping everything feeling tight and awesome controls-wise.
I'd also say it's a part of his style and expression. And Cam and I talked a lot with James about what do we want to double down on? What do we want to improve? Or at least push forward? And tricks were a big part of that. Like, Cam and I are huge fans of manual tricks because as you're swinging through the city, it's part of your expression. So you'll see a whole suite of new tricks, and we deepened the system that we established in Marvel Spider-Man. So
cara destruindo ali a cidade.
Like, you are 17 years old. You have these tremendous new powers.
O Miles tem 17 anos de idade, tá falando aqui.
What are you gonna do while you're swinging around? You're gonna express yourself, and part of the be yourself is Miles figuring out, hey, I've got my own style, my own flavor, and that comes through in his combat as well as his traversal.
This Spider-Man is broken. I would like to exchange.
O Peter aquele tá quebrado, né?
This one will do.
Tá mostrando bastante desse rinoceronte aí. Quando a gente for jogar, ele vai saber quase a missão inteira aí. Ah, essa é a parte do trailer, que ele dá um socão do primeiro trailer, né? Primeira coisa que a gente viu, na verdade, de Spider-Man Miles Morales, eu acho que foi até no anúncio. Ele dá um socão assim, vai se desintegrando assim, o punho. É ou não é? Eu acho que era isso, mas com um zoom ali, né? Sei lá, parecido. Ou era esse mesmo poder aí em outra cena.
First, there's his Venom Punch, which Miles discovers near the beginning of the game
Ah,
while
esse é um
trying
poder
to
dele.
protect a beaten Pete from Rhino. Venom Punch actually doesn't contain any venom as a side note. It's a shock of bioelectricity
Choque de bioeletricidade.
that Miles Morales' co-creator Brian Michael Bendis once likened to getting kicked in the nuts. Fun fact. Anyway, Venom Punch causes Venom stun to enemies on impact in the game, and those stunned enemies take bonus damage from basic attacks. Venom Punch costs Venom power to perform, and you build that by attacking or dodging. It's powerful, but according to Cameron Christian, it won't make Miles invincible, as his enemies will find a way of countering it. Aside from Venom Punch, Miles also has Camouflage, which essentially means he can render himself invisible for short periods of time. During our demo, we saw that it runs on a short timer once activated, so you'll have to choose your moments to use this skill carefully. Even though stealth was a factor in the original game, the team say that this skill will change things up even further, as Miles can use Camouflage mid-fight to buy himself time to get out and reset the stage if things get too hairy, and he can take enemies out from walls or ceilings. In addition to his powers, Miles also has new gadgets, like a gravity well that works by dragging enemies into an area of effect and bringing them all together into one neat point for Miles to chain into a combo with a Venom Punch. Science.
Mostrando um pouco do combate aí, né? E também do contra-ataque dos inimigos. E tá mostrando bastante mesmo dessa missão aí do rinoceronte. Ó, libertou alguns presos ali. Virou Esquadrão Suicida agora.
So I'm excited to see how Insomniac explores this new take on his Spider-Man. What was really lovely to see was that right from the beginning of the game, it's underscored how positive and encouraging the relationship between Peter Parker and Miles is. Peter already knows Miles is Spider-Man, but Miles still has a long way to go before he overcomes his self-doubt and accepts himself as Spider-Man too. I love Peter Parker because he's an earnest, good-hearted nerd who just wants to do the right thing for the people around him. And Miles is coming from just the same place. So to see the two celebrated as Spidey in the same in-game universe and see New York through Miles' eyes is very exciting. Plus, I cannot wait to see some more of Miles' new suits and hear more of his music. It's gonna be really fun to see the world fall in love with him.
Peter Parker has been around for over 60 years. He has a tremendous audience. People love Peter Parker because of his universal appeal. Spider-Man is a character that is in people's hearts across multiple generations. Miles Morales is being introduced to the world, pretty recently, and the comics are a little under 10 years old. Into the Spider-Verse was a big hit. And our game sort of introduced Miles before.
Tá falando aí que o Miles Morales está chegando agora aí na cultura, né? Teve o filme, agora que a gente tá sendo apresentado a esse personagem melhor, né? Comparado ao Peter Parker, já faz muito tempo, faz menos, quer dizer, comparado ao Peter Parker, o Miles Morales chegou faz pouco tempo aí, né? Tá sendo introduzido aí pela Sony, pela Marvel faz pouco tempo, e agora vai ter o jogo aí pra gente cair de vez nesse mundo do Miles Morales. Tava verificando ali se a câmera tava funcionando ainda, porque desligou ali o visor, mas tá tudo ok ainda. Abrir os corações para um novo herói, apesar de ser o Homem-Aranha ainda, né? Mas é um Homem-Aranha de um universo diferente, né? Eu tô ansioso. Eu, pessoalmente, prefiro o Miles Morales do que o Peter Parker. Inclusive, nos filmes, eu acho que Miles Morales é o melhor filme de herói aí. Olha essa parte que é do trailer. Não sei se é contra o rinoceronte. Acho que não é. Porque lá contra o rinoceronte ele dá esse soco, mas não tem
Doesn't give up.
essas partículas aqui voando, né?
Dad said that. He was right.
Nem sei se ele tá dando soco ou tá
Now it's
segurando
your
algo.
turn. Go be a hero, Miles.
É, não é contra o
So,
rinoceronte.
will you be picking up Spider-Man Miles Morales? We'll be covering the game in more detail in the lead up to the PS5 launch. So, do stay tuned
E é isso aí.
Eurogamer for more daily videos. Oh, and by the way, Insomniac, it's a Spider-Cat.
É o gatinho aí. Pra quem não viu o gatinho, já trouxe aí esse vídeo sobre o gato. Já trouxe aí no canal, tá? E tem aí no canal pra quem quiser conferir. E é isso, galera. Muito obrigado aí por assistir o vídeo. Longos aí, 24 minutos. Uma gameplay meio parada, falando aí sobre o personagem. Deu pra descobrir bastante coisa. Tem uns mini spoilers aí durante o vídeo. Deu sono ver o vídeo, mas é legal, é curioso aí para quem tá interessado aí no Spider-Man Miles Morales. E é isso, galera. Deixa o like aí se gostou do vídeo, se inscreve no canal para receber mais vídeos aí de videogame em geral, incluindo o Spider-Man Miles Morales, que vai ter gameplay aqui no canal. Então é isso, muito obrigado e até a próxima.